I like the rant. Ranting is fun. It also cleanses the soul.
Detroit is to be one of the best sports cities in the country, if not the best.
Surely Javi can't be as bad this year as he was last year. Surely that can't be the case.
One of the worst offenses, if not the worst offense, like in the modern era of baseball. Just absolutely atrocious. He is a piece to the puzzle. He is not the entire puzzle.
Right.
He's a puzzle piece, but he is not the entire puzzle.
This is the Michigan in Trumbull podcast with your hosts, Alex S. Freeman and Luke Giaconis. Hello and welcome to the Michigan in Trumbull podcast. I'm Alex Freeman, joined as always by Luke Giaconis. Luke, the thing that's the scariest to me about our intro is that none of those drops are from this season, and yet all of them could be.
Very relevant to the 2024 Tigers, without question. Yeah, it's scary. You know, I was thinking about it the other day, and I've maybe said this on past shows, but this season, it's definitely not as bad as the 2022 season. By all indications, it's the best season thus far under A.J. Hinch, if you want to look at, I guess, record-wise. But when they've struggled, it's hard not to see or to feel like this is reverting back to that 2022 season where just the offense was anemic as all hell. The only real difference between that season and this season outside of the offense was that was the year when everyone just died. Literally, everyone died. Between injuries of the pitching staff, Austin Meadows going through his personal struggles, Eduardo Rodriguez just, taking 2 months out of the season because of his marital problems. It just seemed like everything that year that could have gone wrong went wrong. Whereas this season, health-wise, pretty good. Knock on wood for the most part. It's just the offense has been scuffling. Better of late. Got to give credit where credit is due, but nonetheless, still looking for some more consistency.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, why do I feel so disappointed in a season where the Tigers are hanging around 500, which is not something that we have seen in a while. Of them, just kind of like being around 500. I think there's a decent chance they come out of this week above 500 again. And I was thinking, and I was like, it's because the thing that's going along with that is that they're fourth in the AL Central right now. And the anticipation was that they should be competing for the division, but they're 10 games out of first place.
Yep.
I feel like, And part of that is, and I think we have to acknowledge it, is that the Central is better than we anticipated the Central being. In that I think pre-season, everybody was like, 5 games above 500 is probably going to be more than enough to win the Central. And right now, I think that this team looks like they could and should maybe finish 5 games above 500. And the thing that's particularly disappointing is that is not going to be good enough to win the Central, it looks like.
Yeah, it's a shame that they couldn't play like this last year, because then they really would be right in the thick of things. They would be probably front runners of the division at this point, even though they're a game under 500. But, a lot of these other teams improved over the offseason. And the Tigers did in some ways as well. Definitely not offensively, but pitching-wise, they've kind of bolstered that rotation, which is by far the strongest part of this team right now, is that pitching rotation. And we talked about that. We've talked about that on every episode thus far this season, that the rotation is great. Reese Olson finally got his first win. And, I'm trying to think. I just had a total brain fart there. I'm so sorry. Kenta Maeda, I'm sorry, got a win back in his return from the IL. And with Matt Manning getting designated for assignment. So rotation's been real solid. We'll get to see Tarek Skubal tonight face off against the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's always a treat to watch Skubal. He really is a bona fide ace. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of Um, we've talked about in the past, like it hurts more that they're not playing better overall, because there are parts of this team that are pretty darn good. The bullpen, in my opinion, is starting to regress, and I think that was only due to happen considering how well they pitched that first 2 to 3 weeks. But pretty much since late April, this bullpen has
Mm-hmm.
not been as locked down solid as it was those first few series of the year when the Tigers were kind of playing at their peak. And I mean, if you disagree, look at that Sunday finale against the Blue Jays, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second. Great game. They won it, but good Lord, if it wasn't the sloppiest game I've seen in a long time. And part of that wasn't due to the fact that the offense was leaving runners in scoring position, that they were making errors. As crazy as that game was, a 14-11 score, not one error committed by either team. Both teams had a crap ton of hits. It was just pitching, which was atrocious. And bullpen hasn't been great, but rotation has still been pretty darn solid. And the offense, has kind of wavered. The offense is just inconsistent still. There's games where they'll score 1 run. There's games where they'll score 14 runs. So it's kind of pick your poison.
Yeah, Cody Stavenham of the Athletic. Stavenhagen, thank you. Sorry.
Personal
Cody,
friends. Cody, come on down.
But he wrote following the Sunday game that one thing that was, it's great that Matt Vierling hit the walk-off home run to win the game, but the bullpen trend is troubling and was highlighted in particular in that game. I think that he quoted a stat that they were the bullpen's earned run average was good for 26th in the league in the month of May. So obviously this bullpen that was stellar in April is now currently one of the worst in the league. And obviously that is going to cause problems, especially when your offense is not producing 14 runs in a game. That if a 5-run lead is not good enough, that's a real problem in baseball.
Not one 5-run lead at a point in time. They had 2 different 5-run leads, and both times the bullpen squandered it. I mean, Casey Mize looked pretty awful Sunday. He was lucky to get out of that matinee game with only, I think, giving up 3 earned runs. I watched his start. I thought he looked absolutely terrible.
It was really, it was an ugly start for both starting pitchers, and then obviously
pitching across the board for both
ugly
Toronto
performance
and
from
Detroit.
both bullpens that day.
Yep, yeah. Toronto and Detroit did nothing to bring grace and progress to the name of pitching for baseball, because it was just terrible on Sunday. But if you love a slugfest, that's what it was. I mean, that game, I guess let's just get into it real quick here. That game was, it's been a while. I mean, I went through all the gambit of emotions, as I'm sure you could imagine watching. I was stoked in the beginning. I was like, great, the offense looks good. They're getting them a decent lead out the gate. At-bats were good. They were hitting with runners in scoring position. Bottom half of the lineup was producing, which was really nice to see. Javi Baez just continues to hit really well with runners in scoring position.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as a headache as Javi causes us all every season, I'm telling you, when the game's on the line and you got runners that need in, you might want to give Javi a shot because he's fairly reliable. But between them getting off to that early lead and kind of Blue Jays chipping away here and there, then more of a lead, then chipping away, then more of a lead, then chipping away, then Dalton Varsho, I think it was, hits that home run, gives the Blue Jays the lead. Then Mark Canha with 2 outs gets the base hit, scores 2, and then Matt Vierling with 2 outs in the 9th just clobbered a ball. I mean, it was really great to see. Now, we can't rely on that every single game, but it was refreshing to see, especially given how poor this team had been playing on offense lately. And I don't know. I think it's a weird offense. It's a weird offense. I feel like from the last time we did a show to now, we have seen some improvements. I have to give credit where credit is due. Took 2 out of 3 from Arizona. Looked foolish against Kansas City, which we can talk about that. And then they took 3 out of 4 from Toronto. And we saw a kind of a mixture of everything in that Toronto series. If you think about it, we saw good pitching, low scoring games. I think they lost that first game 9-1. won the second game 6-2, one game 3-2-1, and then one Sunday 14-11. It's like, how do you get a gauge on that? How are we supposed to gauge this team truly? How do you go from scoring 2 runs on Saturday to 14 on Sunday? How do you go from being lights out as a pitching staff on Saturday to looking like you're a third grade Little League team on Sunday? Baseball's a weird game. There's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to it, but them's the ropes. But yeah, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to see the offense come alive on Sunday. It was nice to see them win a tight game as well on Saturday, and especially just kind of coming out of that Kansas City series in particular, where it was like, felt like just like nothing could go right. To find two very different ways to win a baseball game was like, okay, cool, that's good. That kind of lights me up for the future a little bit, because one of the things that I do have to also keep reminding myself about this team, and like kind of the intense inconsistency that we're seeing in terms of defining who they are, is how young this roster is. That this roster is very, very young, that these guys are still learning how to be Major League Baseball players. Even the minor league season is not the same kind of grind that the Major League Baseball season is. And so to be able to figure out how to go day in and day out in the way that you need to as a Major League Baseball player is certainly a learning curve that I had hoped would be shorter this year, but I do have to remind myself at moments when I'm like particularly frustrated at the inconsistency that this is a very young roster still, and they're more or less all still learning how to be professional baseball players.
I mean, this team is desperately lacking some veteran presence. We said that, we've said that many times this season, and you can't look to a guy like Spencer Torkelson right now to be that leader, just because he's, as crazy as it sounds, he's one of the longest tenured Tigers on the team at this point. Yeah. He's just not there yet. Riley Green is just not there yet. They've got such a young nucleus of guys, and that's obviously good. Now we just need that nucleus to produce, because some days it does, some days it doesn't. And I think I'll be curious to see how they handle this offseason, and as we are every offseason. But there will be veteran guys that you could sign that could elevate this team rather quickly this upcoming offseason. And then obviously the trade deadline too. At this point, and it's a good problem to have, we don't know if the Tigers will be buyers or sellers at the deadline, because they're still in the thick of things. Yeah, they're 9.5, 10 games out of the division, but this is a team who's still only 3 back of the wild card.
Yeah.
So if we get to July and this team is still floating around 500 and they're 3 games, 4 games, 2 games out of the wild card race, I don't want them selling. Them selling. For once, just take a shot at it. Take a shot at it. And with all due respect to Scott Harris, but really no due respect, after his abysmal trade deadline last deadline, I don't really need to see what he does for a follow-up this time around. If you're within striking distance come deadline season, go for it. Go for it. I'm not saying unload the farm, but I'm also not saying trade away, pieces just to get a good return. Don't trade away a Jack Flaherty. Don't do that. Don't trade away a Mark Canha. If you're within striking distance, go for it. I think that's what this team, that's what these fans are so desperately clamoring for. And I think the fact that people see that, yes, this team has improved in some ways, and in other ways, like we said at the very beginning, still very much like we're watching a deja vu team from a couple of years ago. It's a weird emotional tug of war. There's some days when they play like shit, I'd honestly just be like, God, if they're going to be bad, just lose like 15 in a row. That way I'll know, like, all right, this is a bad team.
Yeah.
They had a good month of April, but overall, still not a great team. Don't play with the heartstrings and lose 5 in a row, but then play pretty darn good 3 out of 4 to the Toronto Blue Jays. Admittedly, a team that's also scuffling, but, wins are wins. Wins are wins. Sloppy wins are still wins.
I mean, it does, like, the way that they're winning in spurts, it does definitely also feel like a team that if they make the playoffs, they could win 3 series in a row. Like, that is not out of the realm of possibility with the way that they've won in batches this season so far. They've also lost in batches, so it's entirely possible that they could get swept in the wild card and be bounced right away. But also, They could put together that kind of like quote unquote miracle run that we've seen teams make throughout, especially if you add a couple of veteran guys, because that also I think puts this long rebuild process into a good spot if you're in a position to get the team some playoff experience, even if it's not we're going to win the World Series by adding a couple guys at the deadline. It's we're going to make the playoffs and we're going to maybe win a series or two in the playoffs. That is very valuable experience for these guys to get, especially as we have, it appears that there's a nucleus emerging that could and should be around for the next 5-7 years to make a run, get a World Series or two, if the right guys are added around them.
It is interesting. It is. And, you brought up the thing about, you get into a 3-game series. I'll say this, and I get it. We're at the end of May here. We're not even halfway through the season. But right now, if we're just going off of what we've seen thus far, Tigers can get into a 3-game playoff series. Pitching-wise, starting pitching-wise in particular, like their odds. Really like their odds. Bullpen, little shaky. Offense, very shaky.
Yeah.
So
which offense is going to show up? Because
which offense is going to show up? Which bullpen is going to show up? I'm pretty damn confident in this. This is the best starting rotation we have seen in years with the Tigers. Point blank period. Between Tarek Skubal, Reese Olson, those two guys are proving that these are guys who are going to be around for a while. Although Casey Mize has wavered in a couple of his starts, I still think he's going to be a guy who's a part of the puzzle within these next few years. I will say this about Casey Mize, and I think we're on the same page here, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm over Casey Mize being the ace of the future. I don't ever foresee that being him. But could he be a solid 4-5 back end of the rotation guy? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think we all have to stop thinking about Casey Mize as a strikeout guy. That Casey Mize is not coming in and getting 7, 8, 9 strikeouts a game. It's not going to look like Tarek Skubal, but he can get guys to fly out and he can get guys to ground out. And that's just as good as getting strikeouts ultimately, as long as the defense holds up behind you. That if you can just get them into those situations, it seems to be kind of the way that it's going for Casey. It's not always there. Sometimes those guys are placing his pitches a little bit more well hit than one might hope in those types of situations. Yeah. But he's able to generate outs, and that's important. But it's not the ace of the staff. It's not the guy where you're like, okay, that's 12 in a row that he's sat down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Casey Mize could be a totally suitable 4-5 guy, I think, for the Tigers within the next few years. We'll be curious to see. Matt Manning, I don't know what's going to happen with him. At this point, I really don't. Obviously, he's back in Toledo right now, so I think there's a big question mark around him. I think the Tigers would have really liked him to show a little bit more in the few outings he had while Maeda was on the IL. Kind of made it more of a difficult decision for them to either keep him up or send him down, but he did not pitch very well when he pitched in those 2 games or so while Maeda was out. Flaherty's an interesting case right now. If the Tigers suck and Flaherty keeps pitching like he does, he's as good as gone at the deadline. That's a kind of a given. And then Maeda is, I'm still not, I know he pitched, I think 5 scoreless, I want to say, the other night in his return from the IL, or maybe he gave up a run. I'm not really sure. I'm still not ready to rewrite the record book for him just because, had a halfway decent start, but it is kind of what it is there. They've got the pitching rotation, and that's definitely promising. It's just this offense. Speaking of offense, I'd like to read you something, if I may, off of Twitter. So I guess Scott Harris today did a press conference on some sort of media outlet, and on 97.1 The Ticket, the headline reads, Scott Harris says the Tigers aren't yet ready to raise payroll, but has faith in Chris Ilitch. And then there's a kind of a digging deeper quote here. From the moment I got here, Chris Ilitch said that we would have the resources we need to build a really competitive club and to build a club that can sustain winning over a long period of time. We're not quite there yet as far as spending at the level because we need to build the foundation of this team to put us in a position to supplement it with some free agent signings in the upcoming winters. And that, again, is a quote from Scott Harris. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that? Just, I know it's kind of blanket statement, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction is one of really nice corporate speak, but uh, and I'm like, what does that actually mean on the foundation? Like, what are they waiting to see before they bring in big money free agents? Because at a certain point, you are like, is it we have to win the division and then we'll sign? We have to make it into the wild card, and then we'll start signing guys. Like, what is the level of success that they feel like they need to see before Chris will open up his checkbook? And my other flip side of that is like, okay, but like when they start having some of that success, is the flip side going to be, well, we don't need to spend because we're having success with the guys we got. We're happy with the guys we got. So like, why do we need to go sign the next $300 million free agent? Like, that's my like, I guess my truest concern as I listen to that quote is that if we talk about we're not there yet, what happens when we're there? I don't trust Chris to not flip that back and say, well, we're doing fine.
Yeah, I also don't think they realize that they're not, in my opinion, that far away from adding big players. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe this is just me being an overly optimistic Tiger fan, but in my mind, and I know it'll never happen, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be in the Juan Soto running next offseason. Like, I really don't like, they're not the White Sox. They're not the Colorado Rockies, where they're this team who's completely just stuck in the mud, spinning their tires. This is a fringe 500 fringe playoff team at the moment. There's no reason why now can't be the time to strike. I get it. This past free agent class left a little to be desired when she kind of got past Shohei Ohtani. I think as much as we would have loved maybe a Matt Chapman or a Jorge Soler, that wasn't going to happen, and I'm fine with that. But again, this team isn't that far away. I feel like and when I say that far away, I'm saying at the point of it's time to start bringing in guys. Like,
Yeah.
you add Juan Soto to this team, and this is the dumbest thing ever, but it goes without saying, this team instantly becomes better.
Mm-hmm.
If you add Pete Alonso to this team instantly becomes better. So while I'm not holding my breath that guys of that caliber and that kind of marquee namesake are brought in next season, I don't like when we're in the offseason and 8 months from now or however long it'll be, 6 months from now, like, we shouldn't, like when it says like teams interested and it's always the usual suspects, the Cubs, the Braves, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox. Like, the Tigers should be included in that group of people at this point.
Yeah.
They're not obviously as well off or in the hunt for a World Series title as the Braves or the Dodgers, the Yankees, etc. But again, they're not the Rockies. They're not the A's. They're not the White Sox. They're not the Marlins, where it's like, we got no clue what the hell is going on. There's still a ton of questions that this team needs to answer. But you start bringing in bigger name guys like that, yeah, some of your questions are getting answered. I mean, no disrespect to Gio Urshela, but how many more years are we going to bring in guys like that? Just a quick one and done year, a one and done year, a one and done year. Like, at some point, you got to start putting your money where your mouth is. The unfortunate part is the last time the Tigers did that, they signed Javier Baez, and it hasn't worked out for them. And the other guy they signed was Eduardo Rodriguez, who, athletic-wise, ability-wise, it did work out for the most part, but then he opted out. Yep. And he hasn't even pitched yet for the Diamondbacks. So that's karma, Eduardo. I don't care what happened, but that's a little bit of karma, my friend.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think about, like you just mentioned, like I was like, oh yeah, add one of those guys, and that's probably 3, 4, 5 wins right there. In adding those guys, and suddenly you're right in the mix for the division, and you're solidly in a wild card spot. And so if you add two of those guys, sold. Like, I mean, now you're there. Like, I keep coming back to this myself. Like when I look at all the batting stats and all of those things for this roster, and I'm like, this is not a bad roster. Like, this is not. I am fine with all of these guys on the roster. My problem is that it's 9 guys that I'm fine with being on the roster, as opposed to not like 7 guys that I'm like, solid guy on the roster. These are the 2 big hitters. This is the 3-4 that like we've been waiting for. This is the Miguel Cabrera Prince Fielder situation that we just don't have that combo right now, where you have monster bat followed by monster bat, where suddenly you're like, if you get to the top of that order, you're screwed as a team. But we have a bunch of guys that I feel great hitting later in the order.
See, that's where I differ. They had a couple good series, but I'm still not ready to say this 5 through 9 is impressing me. I mean,
I don't think it's our current 5 through 9. It's our
Arizona.
current 1 through 4. I would love to see hitting 5 through 9.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. You want to kind of rearrange the. Yeah, I get you. Well, you are correct about one thing, sir. You're correct about a lot of things, but one thing that I thought a lot too this week in watching some of these games, the Tigers do not have an shit hitter. Like that guy who comes up with bases loaded, second and third, 2 outs, the guy who you desperately want to try to get out prior to, so you don't have to pitch to him with the game on the line. They don't and everyone in the division right now has one of those guys. Even the White Sox, who are terrible. I mean, Luis Robert is still a threat. I don't even know how he's doing this season. He's still hurt or not. Clunky Aloy is Clunky Aloy, but Luis Robert, always a threat. The Twins, you got Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa, they're threats. The Royals, Bobby Witt Jr. is just a friggin' all-star. Sal Perez is a Tigers killer. You know, with the Guardians, Jose Ramirez, another Tigers killer. The Tigers don't have one of those guys right now. They don't. I mean, Kerry Carpenter's been playing pretty well. Riley Green has spurts. Wenzel Perez has been a fun story. Mark Canha, kind of like Riley Green has had spurts. Mm-hmm. But again, none of those guys that you come up like, oh shit, we got to pitch now to Matt Vierling. But hey, maybe after that Sunday matinee game, people will be a little bit more frightened. But that's just kind of the facts. There's not one of those guys. Everybody thought it would be Torkelson. Everyone hoped it would be Javi, but that just hasn't been the case. So,
like I would love
going back real quick too.
I would love a sorry to interrupt you here. I would love a situation where we're going Riley Green leading off, Mark Canha hitting second, big bat 3, big bat 4, probably Kerry Carpenter 5, Spencer Torkelson 6. Like that to me. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, this feels like where all of these guys should more naturally be based on their ability. It's when we have, and then you got Matt Vierling hitting 7th and then your catchers at 8 or 9 and away we go. And like now I'm like, that's a good roster construction that I feel like this offense can actually go out and generate runs in a way that when you need to manufacture a run, you have guys stacked in the right spots.
I think too, real quick, going back to my point of where, I don't think they're that far away from bringing in big names too. Let's not play coy here. Let's use Juan Soto for an example. It's not like you don't have an outfield spot you can put him in. I get it. Riley Green, he definitely still want to keep running him out there. He seems to be a puzzle piece people want to use in the future. And I agree with that too. I think although he's been very hot and cold at times, definitely a guy who's still solid and you want to see what he's got in the tank. But no disrespect to Vierling or Wenzel Perez or Mark Canha, like Juan Soto could easily take those guys' spot. Like none of those guys have played to the point where it's like, well, shit, we'd love to go after Soto, but got Wenzel in center. We can't pull that move off. Like, you know what I mean? So the Torkelson first base kind of Alonso equation, if you want to use another big name, that gets a little bit trickier because then you start asking yourself the question of, okay, well, are we going to move on for Torkelson and try to bring in a big name to kind of take over for him at first? And time will tell with that. But yeah, it's again, winning always cures everything. So they've been playing a little bit better as of late. They played well against Arizona, played well against Toronto. They won those 2 series, but there's still a lot of questions with this team. A lot of questions, a lot of answers we're going to need. And, you look at the month of June as we do kind of a quick kind of preview here, they're going to find out. I mean, I hate to say we're going to find out because, You can say that anyway. We're going to find out what the Tigers are made of these next 2 weeks, because you can play like shit for 2 weeks and play great for 3 weeks, and it doesn't matter. But on paper, they're playing a lot more competitive teams. You're going to get Milwaukee, you're going to get Atlanta, you're going to get Philly, and to start the month, you're going to get Boston, who you're fighting with right now for the wild card. Texas, who although I know is underperforming, is still Texas. We saw them earlier this season. They've got an insane lineup of power hitters.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of before we even get to June, this Wednesday, tomorrow I should say, depending on when this drops, Paul Skeens. So going to get to see that rookie phenom. I guess at this point, rather than looking ahead so much, I just want the Tigers to focus on the now, keep winning series, playing better overall. Hopefully good things will come. I'm having a hard time reading this team. There are days they look absolutely clueless and terrible, and there are days where they put together kind of impressive wins, and I'm like, all right, that was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So I don't really know who this team is still, 2 months into the season. I have kind of an idea of who I think they are, but then as soon as I'm kind of ready to stamp them and write them off, they score 14 runs out of nowhere and give you one hell of a sloppy slugfest of a game that's damn near really fun to watch for whatever sadistic reason.
Yeah, it was a good one. And we'll be keep. Wow, great work. I'm very good at this.
Real quick. That's okay. Real quick. I'm going to help you out real quick before we bid farewell to the show. We have to bid farewell to one more person. Angel Hernandez has retired.
Oh, what a
the
day
wicked
for
witch, the wicked witch of the major leagues has gone. He is gone. He can't hurt us anymore, folks. Now we just got to worry about old man CB Buckner and any other one of these idiots, and we'll kind of go from there. Angel Hernandez retired. I've never seen so many people celebrating one person retiring. I'm telling you this was probably the most unified I've seen baseball fans be in years.
That's
everybody true. Was everybody was planning a parade for this announcement because Angel Hernandez is just the worst. And I saw AJ Hinch made a comment being like, well, obviously we could all say a lot. I've had my fair share of run-ins with him. But at a time like this, I think it's just we say thank you. We thank him for everything he's done and wish him well. And if there's not some reading between the lines there, I don't know what is, folks. But Angel Hernandez is gone. Hallelujah. Take care. Hope to see you never. And better days ahead.
I agree. For both baseball and the Tigers. And we'll be back later this month at some point. I promise we'll get on a regular schedule, folks. Thanks for bearing with us. But boy, the Tigers are fun. Sometimes. Luke, have a good week.
This is the Irish goodbye. This is the Midwest goodbye of exits. We can't talk.